good.
Very good. This is on record at the moment, by the way.
I see, yes.
Is that okay?
Sure.
Sure. Potentially public, therefore.
Sure.
Okay. So
thanks for making that possible. I had hoped to actually get to talk to you so long. First in the Hague, I was really excited that it looked like you were coming to that conference, but that didn't happen in the end.
That was how long ago? About 5 years or something?
No, 2 years. Oh wait, no, it must be 2 years ago. June 2013. That was.
All right. Yeah. Well, long time in this world. Anyway, I've got about half an hour clear, a little longer if we've got stuff to cover.
Well, if there's a lot to cover, I'm still coming over in October and happy to meet up then.
Yes, I'm not at all sure I'm going to be taking part in Caroline's event. I may show up for a little while, I may drop in, I may try and make a contact or two, but I suspect I have too many misgivings about her overall design for it to be useful for me to be a participant.
Design is a big word for now. We had a big call yesterday with a lot of people that she invited into that, and even though I talked to her person to person several times now, and she was over in Amsterdam when I was there and everything, I don't quite see yet how exactly or what exactly she's trying to do. First of all, she's convinced that it has to be something with currency, but it might just be a crowdfunding platform or a awareness raising platform or something, a campaigning platform even, and it all comes together in her head somehow, it seems. And I mean, this Werner Bruegge guy and Michelle Bounds and all these kind of vouch for her. But also, I talked to Michelle briefly, and he also said, nope, I'm not quite sure what she's onto, but I'll give her one more go. And well, she found the money to bring people over to British Columbia, and I was very, very grateful to go back to that beautiful part of the world. So
that's one benefit for sure, but I think we've also got to face the fact that she's a bit in cloudland. She doesn't really know what she's talking about. I think that she is looking at an awareness raising model, but she believes that throwing a currency in there and calling it a social or an ethical currency is going to make a lot of difference. And as such, I've not found a high degree of integrity in her over the years. And I am quite skeptical of the people she's working with in the Vancouver region as well.
Oh, right. Okay. No, that I wouldn't know.
Well, Scott Nelson and I have had conversations over 10 years or so.
All right.
And he seems completely incapable of understanding the idea of a mutual credit concept. It's anathematic to him. He's Bitcoin or bust. So
yes, that sounded well. That seemed to be his role in these conversations so far.
Yeah.
Oh well.
That's October, perhaps.
No, but I'm coming a week earlier and taking a rental car and wanted to see some old friends from the area who now live on the Sunshine Coast, but definitely wanted to go probably over to Tofino, depending how the weather is like, and go back to these beautiful cedar forests and maybe visit there's the permaculture farm where I 10 years ago was part of digging the first shovels out of the ground for a little pond that is now visible on Google Earth, and I wanted to go and see how the guys are doing on the farm and stuff.
Where is that?
On Denman. No, that was on Denman Island.
Oh yeah.
And I was actually traveling in Asia at the time, and then friends asked me to come help them out in the States, and then I happened to linger in BC for a while, and I was just, yeah, I'm really curious to see how it looks to me now after 10 years, but it probably still holds up to be one of the most beautiful parts of the world.
Who are the people on Denman? Who's on Denman?
The guy that I knew was called Matthew Thompson. He was just out of University of Victoria and then moved into that little permaculture farm with the guy called Michael, was the first guy on that. And at the time it was really just a trailer in the forest. and they had built an outhouse, and they were just about to build some more permanent settlements, and how to dig up the pond that they were after, and help them to catch the first chicken that has escaped into the forest and stuff.
My first wife lives on the oldest farm on Denman Island.
All right.
Down in the middle of, right in the middle on the east edge of the island.
This is, I mean, I don't know how many roads there are, but there's a road that goes pretty straight east-west across the island. Yeah. And 2/3 over, I just remember in this wave, 2/3 over, you took a left into the forest heading north, and then another little left turn right into the forest in a path that you wouldn't normally consider being a driveway to a farm. Well, it might look different now, but then it was really in the middle of the sticks.
Well, if there's a pond that can be seen, send me a reference. I'll take a look.
Yes, I'll
try to. Sure. Anyway,
cool. So with all the interactions we had so far, and of course I find that always difficult to convey points virtually often, and particularly since I guess it's fair to say that I don't really have much of a point to make in currency land, so to say. I just came in 5 years ago as an enthusiast, having heard about the idea, and actually having after my 2 degrees in university, coming to the conclusion that I can't say much about the world and find a role in there, because the measurement systems are also off. That it's really hard to go by anything but gut feeling or become an artist or something. Thus, had this idea of changing money somehow, and then people pointed me towards this field called complementary currencies, and that's why I also then your videos about multiple currencies and these beautiful drawings on the buckets on the whiteboard are still stuck in my mind as one of the first things I saw and absorbed into that direction. And so maybe should I tell you a little bit more what I've done in the last 3 years and what I'm doing now, so you know where I'm coming from when we have these interactions, and you know that what the relations are, maybe, because I don't know, it sometimes felt like you would I was in the bricks and pound camp for you, so to say, or Neff was in the bricks and pound camp and all that. And maybe just to say a little bit more about what that part of my journey was about.
Well, perhaps that's definitely interesting, but perhaps it's peripheral as well. I mean, it's pretty clear where your direction leads at this point.
If you have that so clear, I would be really happy to hear, because I'm not quite sure, other than eventually leading to a PhD in 3 years' time or not.
Well, I think the core element is you came in through the NAF and new economics style.
And that's not even true, because I've been doing 3 years prior to that. That just was my first paid employment. That also, of course, gave me probably the visibility that you took notice of.
Oh, yeah. Well, certainly that was the point. And since then, you seem to have been focused on the Brixton model, forms like that, the development of the C3 initiatives. I see your general proposition for government participation. And I find myself completely at odds with all of those directions.
That I got.
Have been that way for 25 years. So one of the things that I found odd was a comment you made way back sometime, that you'd read a lot of my work and you were impressed with it or something or other. And I can't see the reconciliation between my work and your action. That's the issue for me.
All right. So just for these few points that you made so far, so prior to the NEF employment, really, I was based in or out of Brussels, so to say, and really just talking about complementary currencies to people who never heard, sometimes in the hub context. And did you know the impact hubs? I'm not sure if there's one in Vancouver even.
Don't know those ones.
Or these co-working spaces for social entrepreneurs, and it's quite a big global network and brand around that. And there was one in Brussels at the time. And in that context, I also, we started actually 2 currencies at the hub there in Brussels, one being a kind of a time bank for entrepreneurs, and one a reputation currency running in parallel, and also trying to pitch that to the global network there. After that, and after touring like Brussels was just handy to go to the Netherlands and Germany and England and France, and basically learning and meeting all the people doing work in that field roughly. The next stage was really, which nearly led to permanent employment, so to say, had the funding lined up and my wife's visa been easier. I did work with Stephanie Rehrig in Madison, Wisconsin at the time bank there when they started this big Time for the World platform and project. But it just fell through at the time that I couldn't stay longer and actually work properly with her on that. Moved back to, well, did a few side jobs in the meantime, and then moved back to Germany because my wife from Argentina, could move with me to Germany. And at that time, only the NEF put out this job advert for somebody to manage this EU project with that. And on this EU project, I mean, NEF. Oh, there was an echo now. Did I do something different?
No, I think we're just getting a bit of breakdown. It comes and goes.
Oh, right.
Carry on.
It's better now. So with this EU project, I'm again. I'm nearly amused when you say, well, this must be all about bricks and pound, because the bricks and pound wasn't even a pilot in the first 2 years of the project. They only came in much later when Lambeth Council failed to actually implement a mutual credit for the borough there, and were really at odds, or nearly threatened not to have any pilot. So they said, okay, we already have the bricks and pound close by. We'll just re-adopt that as our official pilot for this EU project. And there's no other currency like that in this whole project. So with CCIA, it wasn't. Yes, the one of the novelties of the project was really to be a lot more proactive in terms of policymaker engagement. And the other one was really that we were covering a lot of different currency models, from time credit systems to business-to-business mutual credits, to then the bricks and pound in the end, to they often struggle to actually call themselves something, where it's probably a fiat incentive loyalty point currency in Belgium there, and the Sonant in France really being kind of a hybrid now between a mutual credit at the heart and something that citizens or consumers can buy into for euros. And as I said, bricks and pound only came back in later. And also for the role of NEF, I mean, I had when I arrived at NEF in London, I had a lot of conversation with a lot of people that then approached me and saying, okay, now you speak for currency at NEF, and gave me a big, well, opened their hearts and all their pain and their frustrations with NEF over the many decades, where I can only say, well, yes, one thing is definitely right, that NEF has had different periods of researching different models. And from what I understood, NEF was also working with you on bringing LETS into the UK, or at least the TOESC summits must have been kind of instrumental, or a platform for that at the beginning. And then with Edgar Khan coming over and the time banking idea picking up in the UK, that was another thing where at the time NEF was researching that area of currency world, so to say. And the bricks and pound really only, I don't know if you looked into that, I'm sure you did, but that also has never been a NEF initiative primarily. That was an initiative of my colleagues who at the time worked at NEF, but also were citizens and bricks. And then of course having that double hat on, it was of course convenient to have research projects on the bricks and pound thing, which then also led to the Bristol pound currency and everything. And out of this actually came then the EU project with more partners on board. And again, finally actually opening up this engagement with currencies per se without actually sticking to one particular model.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the experience I've had with NEF has been very problematic. 85, I did come over for a conference, first TOESC conference, and met a few people at that point. James Robertson, perhaps the principal, but Guy Dauncey and others of that group. And what really happened was that my proposition that lead systems were essentially in the same category as commercial barter, and therefore had no grounds for looking for grants, support of that nature. Should be self-supporting, had every capacity to be self-supporting, could provide a full feature across from business, community, whatever. Well, this did not sit well with NEF. NEF were very cuddly and small-town grassroots sort of attitude. BBC 3 and The Guardian sort of fail.
VDC what? What is that?
BBC Three.
BBC Three, yes.
And Guardian, and there was an aversion to the idea that businesses should be involved in that system. This was NEF's attitude. There was a distinct aversion to the idea that the systems should be independent, self-supporting, financially viable. Those were all regarded as irrelevant or impossible. And basically since 86, 87, we've had nothing but trouble from the NEF side. They've consistently supported processes like Let's Link, which you're probably quite familiar with by now.
But only as another initiative in trouble, it seems.
Yeah, it was neither an initiative, and it was trouble from the very beginning.
All right.
Merely a conventional approach to window dressing in many respects. So, make it look like people feel comfortable. And that means institutionalization, committees, all that stuff, bylaws, whatever. So we've been on divergent paths, really, since that point. David Boyle took one particular line. I've been in argument with him about that since the late 80s.
All right.
It really, I think, comes down to the idea of whether the issue of community currencies is an independent sovereign identity matter, or whether it's about becoming part of an institution, an organization, a currency de facto. And certainly the early stages of the systems since the 80s required the idea that you created a system for people to join. That was just necessary from the technology. You couldn't just have everybody in an interactive trading system with any expectation of confidence. So people looked for, this is the Let's system, this is the time bank, this is the whatever. And that gives you a singularity. It means that you end up trying to support one thing at one time in one place. And I've always felt, well, since about 85, 86, that if you do not support multiplicity, then you're restricting people to singularity.
Yeah, well, that line is actually, that sits very well with me personally, but also with NEF as it was at the moment. And that might have, Robertson, I never met James Robertson personally. I met David Boyle a number of times, but he was also kind of not in the office anymore since I had joined, at least, and doing other stuff. So I kind of, I literally inherited a lot of paperwork from him. Well, and apparently some legacy, at least from the outward appear. But my boss, so to say, was Tony Greenham, who was heading the finance and business team, and the currency efforts had all, probably through some iteration, moved to this finance and business team. And Josh Ryan Collins is still there, and also, despite having started the Brixton Pound, he wasn't, even when he presented on stuff, never adamant that this is the model to go. That was really just the thing that they could do at the time. And from what they say, they actually had wanted to start something else, but just because of the difficulties and the, I don't know how do you call that, the infightings between the groups already existing in Brixton, and there were some lingering Let's systems and a BRICS system and some time banks who were all kind of going for that space. They felt he says they felt uncomfortable to start something of any resemblance to that, and thus went into this sterling-backed model. With the CCIA project, our original proposal is also getting the council back into this very big, large effort, where actually for them to start a business or to enhance and do something new on the business-to-business side of the networks that the Brixton Pound had created. And initially, the person who was at the council at the time was quite supportive of that, but then moved away, and we had two interim managers from the council side who less and less understood what things were about, ended up with somebody who had worked for the Brixton Pound, and she just went like, oh, well, let's do the Brixton Pound for the whole Lambeth Council. And at that point also, NEF, as it is at the moment, completely withdrew from that and said, well, you do what you need to do, but that wasn't what we hoped for. We were really lucky to then have the city of Nantes doing something that we had hoped for actually for Lambeth and for the area. But well, maybe that is actually speaks to the singularity now that there is the Brixton Pound and has had all this attention and awareness of people. It's really hard to move things away from it. Maybe not so much people and businesses, but definitely the council and other stakeholders are now really vetted to that idea.
Maybe this is a good point then to sort of bring to the core here. In London, you might say that there's 2 or 3 significant initiatives operating at this point, maybe 5, maybe 1. I don't know what sort of standards one might apply. But how many currencies do you see as being a sort of a natural equilibrium in a place like London in, say, 10, 15 years' time, like when you're reaching some degree of saturation?
Well, it probably depends what you count in. At the moment, people already probably operate in their daily lives with 20 different currencies, and that is not 20 different Let's Group. That would include all the commercial loyalty points and whatever, what have you. I'm really, well, I'm always asked for giving an guesstimate about timing and how many and stuff, but I'm really careful with that because a lot of people had predicted that the financial system would have died 5 years ago, and it's still around. But sometime in the future, if everything goes well, I hope there will be, I don't know, as many people, as many different currencies as there are shared value systems in a place like that. That might be very many.
So how many would that be in your head trip? Are you talking thousands? Are you talking hundreds? You're talking hundreds of thousands?
Hundreds, I would guess. Just to make it, to keep it practical. Hundreds of thousands would mean that there's only 10 people sharing one currency, which, well, if I guess your point you're getting at is there might be one currency per person or even several currencies per person, and that might be very
well, actually we think that in some respects that every person will have the option for their own currency. It'll be not an option that's often taken up. Maybe about 1 person in 100 will find reason to float their own currency. Every business will. Every single business will have its own currency set. Basically, I take this out of the inverse of the Dunbar number. You know, people talk about Dunbar.
Yeah. And what's the inverse then?
Well, it's sort of how small can you go and still get value? Instead of this upper limit of 150, I think it is quite realistic in some cases for people to belong to a clan or a tribe of 20 to 50 people and find benefit from that, particular benefit in the close-knit community aspect of that. So we're generally saying, let's estimate about 1 significant currency per 100 people. So in the London area, we're talking maybe 100,000 currencies in the London area alone. Now, of course, most of those would be numerically very small turnover, occasional use, but they will exist. It's like you have a different piece of software in your computer, you might use it 3 times a year. You'll have currencies that you use 2 or 3 times a year, and that's it.
Isn't that based very much on a positive outlook on the development of general possibilities, technologies, understandings, awareness even? I mean, there is also, just taking from the very polarized scenarios that Bernard Lietaer had in his book, for example, I mean, his very corporate tribal scenario there, where people would actually fall into much bigger clans dominated by one global brand, is also a possibility.
I pay no attention to Bernard's opinions.
No, not as an opinion, just as a scenario. I mean, as the world is going, I would hope that, yes, we get more granular and more, more peer-to-peer, so to say, but it might also go that less and less people give a shit and are really just selling their body and souls to a Coca-Cola-like brand from the onset on, or even selling their children already.
That's what would be a sort of a conventional expectation, using the sort of conventional aggregation, accumulation, exploitation, all those games. Yeah, it's more likely to go that way.
So what you're describing is more a vision than what you actually would put your money on.
Oh no, I got my money on it. We're
all right.
We're into it.
I'm glad people do.
Yeah, you've have you been to openmoney.cc yet?
Yes, many times. Not doing a rigorous, systematic read through everything, but I browsed it.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're getting pretty good at this. We can create a currency in about 3 minutes for any group anywhere on the planet. And we can support it with NFC cards that eliminate the need for many of the participants in the currency to have a computer, a browser, or anything like it. Not even need a phone. I look at things like the Bangla Pesa. You know, I approve, obviously, of Will's enthusiasm and efforts and energy, but not of his design capacities. And really, I think what he's propagating is infinitely colonial and condescending in the consequences. And the phones are going to wipe him out. The phone is going to take the Bangla Pesa and just...
I mean, that was really a practicality there, as far as I understood it. He had people who actually offered to help him find phone stuff, but actually couldn't follow through fast enough for people having access to that, even in that turf there. So printing paper was still in, well, as much as it might look as colonial from the outside, but he did engage all these businesses.
Colonial aspects of it are in the design of the monetary issue, the allocation of who looks after what, the terms of engagement of the putative underwriters. And it's very strange to see the way in which Bangla Pesa underwriter is engaged. I'd love to see the actual documentation, the legal contract or such that the participant signs, because, but whatever it is, like so many shillings is a trivial amount of money in a trivially small set, and it's singular. And it's this singularity that's the biggest problem that I'm looking at the moment. But when we think singular, we cannot think multiple. The two of them are inconsistent. And the tendency for a conventional mindset is to go back towards aggregation, bigness, the more we are together, let's all get in one big system, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's a dead loss. And we've been attempting directions opposite to that now for about 15 years. Go multiple. We've been hamstrung by the limitations of our technology, our software, and the general software context. Mobile is blowing that out. Mobile now makes it basically anybody in the planet who has a browser on a smartphone can be part of our networks. And if they've got an Android phone, they can even use their our app on the Android as a point of sale system. Any phone with an NFC is good. Android. Now, of course, that won't stay exclusive to Android. If we get any perception of what we're doing, then I expect we'll even have Apple paying some attention quite quickly. But my main point is the layer of the applications on mobile phones are the game changer. And they're going to destroy the credibility of centralized institutions in community currency in favor of decentralized P2P autonomous sovereign behavior. Now that's where we're going, and I really wonder why nobody's paying that much attention to what we're talking about.
Probably because it's very hard to convey that to people you want to engage with on the street, I guess. I mean, if you have that urge to issue a currency in a particular place, then you are always bound by the awareness and what people around you will actually be able to perceive and to understand and go with you, at least the first couple of steps.
Well, and that's obviously the problem we have in the Comox Valley, where we've been running these loops for 30 years, and the credibility is zilch. Very few people in this community give us the time of day, which gives us no ground base from which to report significant figures, because our figures here are insignificant. However, you get a breakthrough in any place, anywhere on the planet, and then the whole game changes. And that could be happening very soon. I'm not going to predict any specifics, but at some stage, the entire business case for the systems that are currently being promoted as complementary currencies, I think, will be completely invalidated by essentially free money. Now, this is a conversation that I think can't be accommodated in the next 5 minutes, which is all I've got. So I think that if there is a conversation that would be useful to have,
well,
it would be about the viability of implementations, business models associated with that, and the rollout, propagation, and spread to numeric participation at the level of, say, 100% of businesses in every community, and say 50, 60% of people.
And which is, I mean, these trouble, I mean, so many people always approach us, how do I start a currency independent of the model? And then we always try to actually first, when we had these conversations, we first showed them all the different ones that they might actually think about, instead of just making a carbon copy of the Bristol pound that they all first heard of, which is also a reality then. But when coming to the nitty gritty of actually how to do it, and this is where stuff very different from currency design and theory and visions actually is relevant, and their actually paper so far always beats everything else still. I mean, at least in the slum in Kenya, or even in any place in England, everybody is still thinking about a paper just to bring the message across, not because that is the smartest way of transacting, or that is the best way to issue, or not also for the simulation, the demurrage.
Is there anything in Kendal?
Kendal being the city down here?
Cumbria, yeah.
Yeah, no, there were twice an effort to have a Lakeland pound. I mean, Kendal is also an insignificant small place. It's a very distributed area with about 5 big villages, small cities, and a lot in between. But then normally the entity here is more the whole, at least the national park area, than the lake district. And there were initiatives. We also had the Cumberland Building Society at some point peeking ahead into it and saying, interesting. But again, it's very difficult to get stakeholders aligned. At least Jim Mandel and colleagues always bring that into all the meetings and all the approaches that we have with the national park, with the business community, with the other institutions around us. But nothing that has gelled yet.
Well, very interesting. I appreciate the call. It's good to hear a better appreciation from you of your background coming into this. Certainly, I wasn't aware of the preliminary work that you'd done before you got involved with NAF. I think we could usefully continue these conversations, but
it would definitely be useful for me. I don't know how not. I'm not sure how much I can bring to you, but if you were so generous to give me some more time, maybe just to say what I'm doing now. Officially, I got a scholarship now to write a PhD, and that is on critical discourse analysis of money is the official methodology and title, and how the practice of complementary currencies are challenging this discourse. Basically, trying to get at proving that the Bank of England doesn't understand money anymore, which I think it's very easy to prove even by the recent publications, which are logically inconsistent if you read the last page first and turn back to the first page.
Totally agree with the limitations of the Bank of England. My question would be, what's the point?
Well, actually just opening in your if I were to pitch to you, I would actually say, well, actually open the possibility for understanding multiplicity again in that domain, where at least regulators, policymakers are still very much not only focused on one kind of money, but exactly the one that they're issuing and the way they're issuing it at the moment. And legislation is hampered even still by the idea of gold coins, and they actually just demanding it whenever they have to, just to fit the bill for people who don't know what's all about, but actually not making any progress. Basically getting to a point where institutions can recognize that money is not a thing, and that money is a social technology that will very quickly spin out of their understanding and find better ways of framing that. Of course, I won't get to actually write legislation, but this whole regulatory legal element to it is, I think, where it's just fun to prove that it's so off at the moment. Already now, never mind your vision of 100,000 currencies, but even now it is completely off when just trying to map onto Brixton business-to-business currencies, Bitcoin, what they think money is.
Just one specific question. Do you know the Let's Play game? Have you encountered that one yet?
I'm not quite sure. I might have seen versions of it, but I'm never quite sure if it's just another version of what I know or something very specific. Nobody actually, and I had never had the chance to play that under that name by people who might, I don't know, by somebody who might have learned it particularly.
Okay, well, this sort of sets the scene pretty effectively. I think the possibilities exist for an interactive, I'll pitch you what we're doing, you pitch me what you're doing, this sort of a to and fro, which we might do with sort of a half-hour interaction like this on a Hangout, maybe every week or so.
As soon as I'm settled here, I hope I have actually ample time for all this. And actually, well, it serves me well as data, even for my PhD of getting better.
Well, I think it would also lead very effectively into when you're over this direction. If you're on Denman Island, you're only 15 miles from me.
Yeah, I know, and my idea so far was to go up the Sunshine Coast and then take the ferry over, which goes directly to Comox, right, and then drive down from there.
Perfect. So I think in terms of having leverage during that interaction, we need some preliminary work. I think that would be my proposition on this, is that prior to you being over here, we have a couple more of these sessions, less on history, philosophy, life, whatever, and much more on technicalities and detail. And therefore, I would suggest a one way and another way, you know, like you tell me what you're doing, I'll tell you what I'm doing. So if that appeals, let's see if we can find some time between now and October and put some mileage into that.
But you have to drop out now, so we'll do that by email just to bounce a few dates. I mean, I'm really flexible for the upcoming weeks because I just moved here and have very little else on my calendar.
Well, that's good for me
too. Stuff. So if you just want to send me a few dates, I mean, this time of day is excellent for me.
Yeah, it works for me.
Early morning on. Yeah. So just send me a few days when maybe once every week or something, and that should still fit easily.
Well, thank you. I think that's a very good start. It's been rocky. I apologize for the asperity of some of the interactions. But I do feel I've been sort of marginalized in this conversation by some 15 years of what I call, well, the ideas of Bernard Lyotard, principally, which I see as more constitutional and structured and less relevant to the situation. But it's created divergence. It's made me rather off the edge and noisy. I expect I'll stay there. So,
well, I'm just in awe of people who have, like yourself and others, been in that whole effort for so many decades already. I mean, I have 5 years under my belt, and it gets quite exhausting sometimes, always being in opposition or on the edges of what normal people and normal
but it's so much easier when you know you're right, you see. So it makes my life so much simpler. Okay, I really have to cut and run.
That's fine. Send me some dates. Talk to you soon. Cheers.
Bye now.
Bye.